The Xbox Series X has finally surpassed the sales in the US on the Xbox Series S month over month. And this is a big deal. I think it's a big deal for two reasons. I think it indicates the direction of this generation of consoles, as well as sets us up for what the next generation of consoles is going to be like. Granted, Xbox is already working on that next generation of consoles, but I think there's lessons learned here between the Series S and the Series X, and it's going to be very interesting to see what they decide to do going forward. More importantly, I think, why is this the case? Why is the Xbox Series X now surpassed in the US the Series S in sales? Why at this time? Why for September 2024? I mean, we're in October, but this data is from last month, September. Why is it finally happening now? What is going on here? We're going to read an article from purexbox.com, and they give one reason, but I'd like to submit a different reason, or not a different reason, an additional reason to this that's playing into the perception of this generation of consoles, because I think it's important. There's also some news about Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 devs were asked, hey, you coming to Xbox? Think you're going to come to Xbox? Do you want to come to Xbox? And they gave a response, and they gave a very interesting response that I think we should go over, and it just gives us an opportunity to once again discuss. I think their answer shows that the landscape is changing. Once again, I mean, we know that it's changing. We've talked about a lot. We've talked about that change a lot here on this channel. But it's just interesting. It's an interesting, it made news, and it's interesting. The response is interesting there, in my opinion. Before we jump into it, though, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. My name is X1 the Gamer. Drop daily videos on Xbox and gaming right here on this channel. Like, subscribe to us. We also have a podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to us there if you enjoy listening to podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review. Also, if you like what we're doing, consider become a member. You can become a member for $4.99 a month. You get a loyalty badge. You get access to exclusive daily takes only available to members. So please consider supporting us if you like what we do here. Let's jump into this, though. This is a news article over at purexbox.com. 4 years later, the Xbox Series X is now outselling the Xbox Series S in the US, according to fresh sales data. This is by my main man, Ben Carey, over at Pure Xbox. Microsoft's decision to launch two completely different consoles as part of its current gen gaming strategy was always a bold one. And for a long time, it's been the cheaper console that's thought to have sold more units overall. However, according to new data from Circana, which is an NPD group, Xbox Series X is finally outselling Xbox Series S in the US. According to the firm's September 2024 sales charts, those scales have just been tipped. Xbox Series X now accounts for 51% of the platform's overall sales in the US. Of course, that would put the cheaper Xbox Series S at 49% of overall sales in the region. As for the September 2024 split specifically, Xbox Series X is at 58%, meaning that if this trend continues, the gap between the X and the S sales will only widen. We're genuinely curious to see how this goes, given that the Series S is the cheaper console and reduced prices tend to drive console sales in the back half of a generation. Going back to 2020, 2021, though, and this is the reason. This paragraph here is the reason that they give as to why the Series X and Series S, there's a difference in sales numbers there. Going back to 2020 and 2021, the Xbox Series X and PS5, for that matter, was regularly out of stock at major retailers worldwide. And this stock shortage likely led to an uptick in Xbox Series S sales. Microsoft's all-digital machine was routinely available during the early years of the pandemic when the big boys weren't. But of course, that's now a non-issue in 2024. It'll be interesting to see how other regions fare and when we get that data. But yep, Xbox Series X is now outselling its little brother over in the US. So obviously, I think, first of all, I think what really put a damper on this generation was the pandemic and was these shortages when it first launched. And they lasted for a long time, if you remember, a very long time, well into the life cycle here. But the Series S was always available, was always readily available. You'd see them at Costco. And so it quickly became one of the top sellers or the top sellers of the machines for Xbox, simply from a supply-demand standpoint. Like, it was available when the Series X was not, when it was in shortage. And so it has that going for it. However, I think there's another reason that So I think that's why the Series S is there. And now, of course, the Series X has caught up as far as supply. It's readily available. You can get it on demand when you want. And that's why that's helped to push it up and why it's now surpassed the Xbox Series S in the month of September here in the US. I think there's another reason, though. And I think that other reason is as we get into later in the generation for this console cycle, what's becoming more important for games and gamers is hitting these next generation kind of numbers. So high resolution and performance mode, 60 frames a second. If a game does not have 60 frames per second, then it better have amazing graphics. And most games kind of give that option there. But most games now, especially these later games, I'll give a prime example here. New World just dropped on the Xbox Series X. Now it has a 4K high performance mode, it has a quality mode, and then it has a 4K mode, high fidelity mode. It's got a performance mode, 60 frames per second, and then it's got a in-between quality mode that really tries to balance those two. I play on the 60 frames per second. I am becoming more and more, I have a really nice TV, and I'm becoming more and more as like that's a minimum requirement for most games. Now, not all games. Obviously, the fun factor matters, but in playing around between those three settings, the 4K does look the nicest. It has the most details, obviously, but the 60 frames is a superior experience, in my opinion, on that. And I think as we get into these later generations, or later into this generation, that is becoming the new norm. That's becoming the new minimum standard for a lot of people, especially as televisions become cheaper, as televisions are able to bring you these numbers, 60 frames per second, etc. Monitors are becoming cheaper and more readily available as well. I think the gamer minimum ask here, even on the console, is starting to be 30 is the new 60. And that's just a reality. And I think that the Series X offers that more often than the Series S. Yes, you still get the speed. I think the big thing this generation, the big leap this generation, was obviously speed. We basically got rid of load screens. In fact, when a game has a load screen, here's looking at you, New World. It's an MMO, so we're just waiting for servers. But you're like, oh my goodness, a load screen again. I haven't seen one of these in a while. So load screens have really kind of gone away. They almost don't last. They almost don't exist. I mean, they do. I'm being hyperbolic here. But they've really been diminished. And it's because that's the new technology. I would say overall, this generation, it does feel like a little bit of a miss from both the PS5 and the Xbox Series X in this respect. We really haven't had very many games, if any at all, that have pushed these consoles to the limit, where we've been like, yes, this is a next generation game. Now, I will say Xbox does have that exception. I can't speak for PlayStation necessarily, but Xbox has that exception. I do think Hellblade 2 was that wow factor game. It had that. If you haven't played it, go play it. It is definitely a wow factor. It is a tech demo for what the Series X can do, especially if you've got a nice monitor or a nice TV that can really push everything to the max there for you. But I think this generation is largely seen as this in between. I think it just got off on the wrong foot with the pandemic. And no matter what console you're talking about, game development got delayed, et cetera, et cetera. And we're barely kind of catching up to that now. The next generation, I think there's a reason Sarah Bond says it's going to be the biggest leap between generations that we've ever seen. I think because they recognize that a lot of people probably stayed behind on the Xbox One and the Xbox Series S and Series X wasn't a big enough selling point in a lot of players' minds for them to upgrade until roundabout now. I think most people are starting to upgrade now, but that's 4 years later. That's 4 years after the launch that we're finally getting the upgrade for a lot of players, and the Series X is being seen as this next generation console. Again, though, I think the big thing here is the minimum expectation for console gamers. Not just that why is the Xbox Series S? Why has it passed the Series S? I think that it's not just that supply is now solved, supply chains are solved, and it's readily available. I think it's that the minimum expectation from console gamers is that 60 frames per second. I think that's a big deal. I think, and as someone who kind of mocked that PC master race mentality for a long time, not every game needs it, obviously. There are specific type of games that don't need it and that just look fantastic and that are still this immersive experience. But for the most part, if a game has a performance mode at 60 frames per second, I have my game switched onto that performance mode because it is just a nicer experience overall. I would love to know what you guys think, though. Do you think that that is the reason why the Series X? I would actually say that's more of a reason than the supply chain. I think obviously the supply chain is a foundational reasons, but I think it's that this expectation, the bar is set higher now than what it used to be for console gamers. And I think that higher bar, the Series X can hit that higher bar of like 60 frames per second that just the Series S just doesn't. The Series S has the speed upgrade. It doesn't have that performance upgrade on all games. Some games it does, but not on all of them. But let me know what you think. Do you disagree with me? Do you agree with me? Let me know in the comments below. Let's jump to our last story here for the day. This is about Helldivers. Helldivers 2 addresses possibility of an Xbox port. We're not going to get an Xbox port. No way. Sony's not giving that up. This is their most successful live service game. They're not giving up an Xbox port. No way. So here is what was said. In response to a question on the game's official Discord, Arrowhead community manager Twinbeard discussed the possibility of an Xbox version of Helldivers 2. So first of all, can I say something? The fact that we are quoting here a community manager and he's making big enough news is not good. Your job as a community manager is actually not to make news. Like that's your job, to help the customer in a way that addresses their concerns. And if it doesn't readily address their concerns, you bump it up to development. You pass on the feedback and say, hey, this is something that needs to change, etc., etc. And for those of you that don't know the backstory in Helldivers 2, Helldivers 2 was just at the top of its game, at peak, and then their community team just messed up. They responded to fans inappropriately of the game, to players of the game. They started to mock them because they disagreed with them on some polarizing issues. But regardless, anyways, let me get off my high horse here. A community manager should not be making this news. That's all that I'm saying here. But here's what they're saying. Discuss the possibility of an Xbox version of Helldivers 2. Videogamer.com shared the news, which sparked even more discussion about one of 2024's most asked question. Who says Helldivers 2 couldn't come to Xbox, says Twinbeard, who went on to explain the decision falls on the shoulders of Sony and Microsoft's Phil Spencer. Quote, it's not up to us, but to Sony and Phil to duke out. But hypothetically speaking, if both partners think it would benefit them from a financial brand standpoint, it could. If Sony believes it won't, though, it won't. In my opinion, I think the community manager here is speaking way above their pay grade. I would not let them on my team, personally. This could cause all kinds of issues for you here. But regardless, I do think clearly, in my opinion, and this is all, how do I say this correctly? This is all just me guessing and kind of reading between the lines here. Clearly, at the studio, this has been discussed. And this statement comes off to me as a frustration. Like, look, it's not up to us whether it doesn't come to PlayStation or Xbox. That's up to Phil and Sony. And it sounds like behind the scenes, Helldivers wishes they were everywhere, which would line up. Granted, this is my bias and this is my viewpoint that I think the gaming landscape is changing in such a way that all game developers want their games in as many places as possible. And the reward of being excluded and exclusive to one console just isn't what it used to be. And so I think this statement speaks to that a little bit, but also the fact that it's a community manager. Helldivers 2, with what has happened, all the drama surrounding your community managers, the fact that a community manager is making news at all is not a good sign. Not a good sign at all. Their job is not to make news. You have a community manager so that there's no news to be made, except news that you would like to release at the time and date that it releases, right? Your focus is on interacting with the community, engaging with the community, facilitating community engagement, not on creating news. And That's not, once again, it's not what happened here. And I think they've already had lots of problems with community managers, I think, speaking above their pay grade for sure. Anyways, I would love to know what you guys think, though. Am I reading too much into this? Is this a non-story? And am I being too liberal with my interpretation here? I may be. I fully admit. This is one. Normally, I'm 100% confident. Like, yeah, that's solid. I got this. This one, I fully admit my biases may be getting the best of me here. But I just don't see a community manager saying something like that without it coming from meetings. As far as like, I'm sure someone was ranting about, oh, I wish we weren't exclusive on just PlayStation or something like that. It has that feel, right? But again, maybe I'm biased. Let me know in the comments below. Please tell me. Yell at me. I know you already do anyways. Yell at me and tell me that I suck and I'm wrong. I do actually genuinely appreciate the dialogue there. That does us for today, though. I do think the Helldivers stuff is interesting. Sony's going to not let that go ever. Like, it's Sony's baby. I think they're smart. If I was in charge of them, I would say, nope, Helldivers is us. Let's make this even better and bigger. Let's keep it here. It's a big opportunity for us. It's the most successful live service game I think that Sony has done in this manner. This type of game usually dominates on Xbox. This is like a competition point for them. So that's just my opinion. How many times have I said, take a drink every time I say that's just my opinion? This is just my opinion. There you go. There's 2 more drinks right there. That does it for today, guys. Hit the like button, subscribe to this channel. Again, consider supporting us and becoming a member. Regardless, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.